Every single year, millions of people wake up to the same thoughts. I should start my own business. Some even take the first step to start the business, and a smaller group make it past the excitement phase. And then, almost all of them disappear. Not quietly, not gracefully, they disappear after months, sometimes years of efforts, stress, late nights, and belief. And the scary part is, most of them did everything right. They had the idea, they had the motivation, they followed strategic business advice. So why did they fail? We usually blame the obvious things, right? High barrier of entry, lack of capital, outdated technology, poor execution, bad timing, human error. And sure, all of that matters. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Over the last decade alone, entire industries have struggled. While brand new companies started by people with fewer resources, less experience, and sometimes no connection at all, they quietly exploded. Maybe you have seen it happen up close. Maybe you started the business yourself, full of optimism, convinced that this was the one. This was the one business that was going to change everything for me, you said. And then, it didn't work. Yet, in that exact same period, you watch other companies rise at an almost ridiculous speed. Companies hitting tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, in what seems like no time at all. There's actually a company that crossed over 100 billion in annualized revenue in just 8 months. And when you see that, you can't help but ask the question that continues to linger. What do they know that I don't? What are they doing differently? How does it look so effortless? And eventually, you notice something important. These are not traditional businesses. They don't move slowly. They don't ask for permission. They don't wait for decades to matter. They are startups. Lean, aggressive, highly focused startups. Many of them were bootstrapped. They went from obscurity to global relevance faster than you can ever imagine. So the real question becomes, what actually is a startup? Why do they play by different rules? And how are they able to succeed in an environment where most businesses fail? So let's clear something right away, because this is where most people get confused. A startup is not a small business. A restaurant is a business. A clothing store is a business. A local agency is also a business. But a startup is something very different. At its core, a startup is a tech-enabled, scalable business that is designed for rapid growth. Its goal is not stability at first. A startup exists to answer one critical question as fast as possible. What is the right thing to build that people actually want and will pay for? Speed of learning matters more than anything else, and this is where the idea of a lean startup comes into play. A lean startup is a methodology built around one brutal truth. Most ideas are wrong at the start. So instead of spending years building something in isolation, a lean startup shortens the development cycle and releases products quickly and learn directly from the real users. Because if you want to build a sustainable long-term company, you actually need to do something that sounds counterintuitive. You need to expand very fast with the lowest possible cost while learning as quickly as possible. This requires a system, and that system is usually built around design thinking. Design thinking is about solving problems, starting with people, and here's how it works inside the startup. First, you need to empathize. This requires you to deeply understand the human problems that you are trying to solve. And in order to do this, you need to ask yourself some necessary questions, like how many people are actually facing this problem, and how are they solving the problem currently, and how big is this market, and most importantly, how scalable can the solution be? Because every $1 million startup is currently solving a problem that exists. They are just solving it better, cheaper, faster, and differently. Next, you need to define, which requires you to reframe the problem based on the real user behavior. Because the way you define the problem defines whether the solution has a chance to succeed. Then you ideate. This stage is about generating many possible solutions. Startups brainstorm aggressively. They sketch, they map out ideas visually, and they create competing approach. Fourth stage is prototype. Next, you need to build something. Not the finished product, but a representation of your idea. Just good enough for someone to interact with, and just enough for you to test your assumption. Then you test. Real users interact with the prototype, then feedback is gathered, and assumptions are being challenged. Testing tells you what works, what doesn't work, and what needs to be changed. And all of this fits into the lean startup loop, which requires you to build, to measure, and to learn over and over again. But there's one problem. Before you can empathize, before you can test, and before you can measure anything, you need something to work with. You need an idea. Here's the first mindset shift that separates founders from everyone else. Great startups don't start with ideas. They start with problems. If you begin by just having an app idea, you're already at risk. But if you begin by identifying a group of people that are deeply frustrated by a specific problem, now you're building something that is real. So the first questions are always, what problem am I solving? Who exactly am I solving it for? And how painful is this problem? Because people don't pay for clever ideas. They pay for solutions to their problem. In order to think of $1 million ideas, first you need to obsess over problems, because most valuable problems hide in plain sight. They show up as tasks that people complain about, workarounds that people rely on, and products that people tolerate but not enjoy. This leads to one of the most reliable ways to generate startup ideas. Then you find the product gap. Instead of trying to invent something new, you should identify an existing product and ask yourself this question: what problem does this product already solve? And why are users still complaining about it? Then you think disruptively. Disruptive innovations often look unimportant at first. These are solutions that are usually ignored, underestimated, or laughed at. People shunned the ideas of self-driving cars and AI so many years ago. So if you want to build a truly valuable startup, you need to train yourself to think 5 to 10 years ahead. You should ask what behaviors are changing clearly and what technologies are improving exponentially. Most people build for the present, but startups that scale, they build for the future. Then you need to align the problem with you. You're not just building a product, you're committing years of your life to that thing. So the best startup ideas live at the intersection of 4 things. What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What will people pay for? And what does the world actually need? Because your skills will keep you competitive, your interests will keep you going, the market demand keeps you paid, and the real world needs keep you relevant. Now when these things overlap, you don't just have an idea, you have leverage. Now that you have identified the problem and thought of an idea, before you can build anything, you need to validate that idea. There are 3 filters that almost every serious startup idea has to pass. The first is scalability. Ask yourself, can technology do the heavy lifting? The next is market growth. Is this particular market expanding exponentially or is shrinking? Then the next is capital efficiency, because investors don't just look for good ideas, they look for the efficient ones. Once a problem passes this filter, something changes. You stop guessing, you stop overthinking. Now you are ready for the next step. You don't build the full product, you don't chase perfection, you build the smallest possible version that your idea actually works. You build an MVP. Now this is the moment where most startup ideas either become real or they quietly die. Because thinking is safe, planning is very comfortable, but building forces you to confront reality. And the first reality you have to accept is this: you don't build a startup alone. At the early stage of your startup, you don't need a massive team, but there are 3 very important people you need in a startup. The first is the hustler, which takes care of the business, the strategy, the marketing, and the sales aspects of the business. Then you need an hipster, which is responsible for the design and the user interface. Then you need an hacker, someone who is proficient in engineering and development, who will actually build the product for you. Sometimes one person fills more than one role. Sometimes the founder may even take on the 3 roles at the beginning of the startup. Now let's talk about what actually gets built and in what order. Because a startup doesn't go from idea straight to perfection. It moves in stages. The first stage is the proof of concept. This answers the simple question: is this even possible? Can this core idea, can it even work at all? Then the next stage is the prototype. This is the early representation of a product, and it doesn't need to be scaled, it doesn't need to be polished. A prototype exists to test understanding, not performance. Does the users actually get it? Does this solution actually make sense? Then you move to the minimum viable product. This is where everything begins to matter, because an MVP is the smallest version of your product that solves the core problem, that delivers real value, and can be tested by real users. And this part is very crucial, because an MVP is not the final product. It is not meant to impress everyone, it's not meant to be feature rich, and it's not meant to scale beautifully. It's just meant to teach you something. Everything is an experiment. Because at this stage, your startup is not a company. It's simply an hypothesis. You are testing assumptions like, do people actually want this? Will they use it more than one time? Does it solve the problem better than the existing options? Will anyone pay for it? The MVP exists so you can receive fast and honest feedback from your targeted audience. Your MVP should include only essential features, the features which make the product work. Now, once the MVP is live, you watch and observe how people use it, where they struggle, where they live, and what they love about the product. And then you go through the cycle of build, measure, and learn. And this is what turned ideas into companies. Before you go any further, there is one question that you must be able to answer. How does this startup actually work as a business? Because even the best MVP means nothing if there is no sustainable model behind it. Like, who pays, why do they pay, and how does value flow through the system? This is the next layer. And this is where many promising startups hit a wall. At this point, you have validated the problem. You have built an MVP. People are actually using it. Now comes the question that turns your project into a company. How does this actually make money? This is your business model. A business model is simply a clear explanation of how you deliver value to your customers and how you capture value in return, and what cost makes the business sustainable. Now, most startups don't invent new business model, they simply adopt some proven ones. Here are some of the most common business model. We have the freemium, whereby a free core product is being given with some paid upgrade, for example your Google Workspace. Then you have subscription, whereby users pay a recurring fee for ongoing value, such as Netflix subscription. Then you have your marketplace business model, where you connect buyers and sellers and you take a cost for yourself. This is adopted by companies like Amazon. Then you have ecosystem business model, where a core product is supported by some added integration, such as the Apple product ecosystem. The key isn't choosing the best model, it's choosing the one that fits your problem, your product, and your users. Now, you also need to consider the type of startup that you are building, because business models depend heavily on who your customer is. It can either be a B2C, which means business to customers. In this case, products are built directly for the individuals. It can either be a B2B, which means business to business, where products are built for companies. The most common word here is SaaS, where softwares are sold to businesses to solve specific operational problems. To make sense of everything, startups often use business model canvas. Think of it as a one-page map that shows how the business works. It breaks down the startup into 9 core components. You have customer segment, who are you serving and who are you not serving? Then value proposition, why customers will choose you over your competitors. Then channel, how business discover, access, and use your product. Then customer relationship, how you acquire users and how you keep them. Then key activities, this is the most important thing that your company has to do in order to function. Then key resources, the assets that make everything possible, such as technology, people, data, and your brand. Then key partners, the external relationship that helps your business to scale. Then revenue stream, where your money actually comes from and from whom. Then cost structure, everything it takes for your business to operate. Now, once your business model is clear, something important happens, because you stop guessing. Now you are positioned, because you understand your economics, your growth, and you can explain your startup idea in a simple sentence. And this is where another door opens, called funding. Because investors will not just fund your idea, they will fund models that can scale. You have validated the problem. You have built an MVP. You understand your business model. Now the question becomes, how fast do you want to grow? And how much control are you willing to give up to do that? This is what fundraising is all about. Contrary to popular belief, funding is not a badge of success. It's a tool. And like any other tool, it can build your business or it can destroy your business. Not every startup should raise money. Some of the most successful startups in our world today started by funding themselves. This is a process called bootstrapping, which means building your business with little or no outside capital. Bootstrapping involves using your own savings or revenue from early customers or support from friends and family, and crowdfunding from future users. The advantage is that you keep control. You move at your own pace and you answer to customers and not to investors. While the downside could be that you grow slower and your mistakes are more expensive and your resources are often limited. Now, if speed matters more than control, startups often turn to equity funding, which means giving a percentage of your company in exchange for capital. Common equity sources include angel investors, venture capitalists, or private equity firms. Equity funding doesn't just bring money, it brings expectation, because investors expect growth, they expect returns, and they expect clarity. Now, not all funding comes in form of monetary value. Some startups go through structured support systems like incubators, accelerators, or even government grants. Startups can also raise money without giving out ownership. This usually comes through banks and commercial lenders. It is important to know that debt can work when revenue is predictable, and this adds pressure that some early startups cannot just handle. No matter where the money comes from, one thing is unavoidable: you need a pitch deck. A pitch deck is not a business plan, it's a narrative, a short, clear presentation that explains what you are building, why it matters, and why it could win. At its core, every pitch deck answers just 3 questions. What is the problem? Why has that problem not been solved? And how are you going to solve the problem? If you can't explain your startup in a simple way, investors won't trust it simply. Startups don't win because they raise money. They raise money because they have proved something worth scaling. And when all these pieces comes together, the problem, the product, the model, and the story, a startup stops being an idea. It becomes a vehicle for growth, for impact, for change. And that's the real reason why startups succeed. So if there's one thing that you take away from this video, it's this: startups don't succeed because their founders are smarter than anyone else. They succeed because they think differently. They don't chase ideas, they chase problems. They don't wait for uncertainty, they test assumptions. They don't build in secret, they learn in public. And most importantly, they don't try to be right, they try to be useful. Every startup you admire started exactly where most people stop, with uncertainty, imperfect information, and a rough idea that probably didn't look impressive at the time. The difference is that someone decided to move, irrespective of the doubts they had within them. They asked better questions, they listened harder, they built less and learnt more. And over time, the process compounded. So if you have ever felt stuck between wanting to build something meaningful and being afraid whether it's going to succeed or not, understand this: that feeling isn't weakness, it's the starting point. Because startup is not about technology, funding, or billion-dollar valuation. It's about solving real problems for real people and having the courage to test your thinking in the real world. And maybe the next company that figures something out isn't a team in Silicon Valley. Maybe it's someone watching this video right now. If this video made you to see startups differently or made something click for the first time, take a moment to do one small thing today. Identify a problem that genuinely frustrates you and think of innovative ways to offer solutions to that problem at scale. And that is how startups begin. And if you enjoyed this content, do well to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It feels so good to be back to this channel after several months of absence. During this absence, I've been creating content on my other YouTube channel, which you can also check out. And above all else, remember the golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules, make fortunes.